today's video, the Fof is talking with Warren Wulff, and Warren's going to explain how to make the best presentation possible, so stay tuned. Fof, it's all yours.
Hey, Warren, thank you very much for being my show again. I appreciate that. So I just want to start with saying, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Jamie. Nice to be on your show again. How are you?
So what's your educational background?
So my educational background is I went to University of British Columbia to do a bachelor's in science in biology, and I graduated there in 2001. In 2004, I graduated with a Bachelor of Education degree, also from UBC, and that allowed me to be a licensed high school science teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2010, I graduated with my Master of Library and Information Science from Western University. At that time, it was known as the University of Western Ontario in London. And that means I am a librarian now.
Okay. So that's your current position then. Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
So,
So I'm actually head librarian for one of the federal science departments.
that sounds good.
The government of Canada. Yeah,
That sounds great. That sounds great. Sounds like a good job.
it is.
What is your background in presentations? Do you give a lot or?
Yeah, so I give a lot of presentations, and when I talk about presentations, I mean that pretty broadly, actually. It could be anywhere from a large room where you have a lot of people and you're giving a formal presentation. It can be smaller, maybe a group of 10 people. I can, and that gives a varying degree of, I get a varying degree of a notice. Like I might be given, a month before I have to give a presentation. Or sometimes presentations can be as small as one-on-one interactions.
Mm-hmm.
So as a librarian, I have people who come into the library and they will say, that they're looking for a certain type of information, as maybe a book, or maybe or just general information about a topic. They don't know where to start, and I consider that in some ways a presentation as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's very ad hoc. It depends on the fact that you have someone in front of you who's an information seeker, and if I'm not able to teach them, then at that moment they might walk away and not come back. And I consider that type of one-on-one training also a form of presenting, because you're presenting your knowledge as a way of bridging between that person and the information they're trying to find.
Mm-hmm.
So it runs the gamut. So in my job, yes, I do presenting, and I do presenting from large rooms and down to one-on-one interactions. And
Okay.
it can be public to VIPs, whoever, anyone in between, scientists.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many presentations have you given? Just ballpark, including teaching at school and all that. How many presentations would you see you did?
So if you consider when I was a high school teacher, and I would say that you're giving, if you consider a class to be a form of presentation, which I think it is, you have a beginning, middle, and end, and you are working through information in a logical fashion that you have mostly predetermined. I would say that teaching itself is a presentation too. So if I consider all formats of presentation, from large format through small and in teaching, I would say I've probably given in excess of 5,000 presentations in my career.
That's quite good. Awesome. That's great. So what makes for a great presentation? Because I know that a lot of my viewers, or some of the viewers, want to know this because they're in school right now and they want to make sure that they know how to make a presentation great and just make lots of sense and just for people to enjoy.
So first of all, you have to know your audience and the format of the presentation. And by format, I mean, like, is this something where it's considered to be a formal situation where the audience is a VIP and you have a certain amount of time to say a certain amount of things, and everything that you're doing has been pre-scripted, through to the by format, I also mean, things like advertising. Is it like an open, like, are you presenting to anyone who might come in? Or do you have a certain target? So, like, for example, from a student point of view, if you were to be defending, let's say you're a grad student and you're defending your thesis or dissertation, sometimes that defense is done in an open forum where anyone can walk in. But is that your audience? Or is your audience indeed the people who are there to judge your dissertation or thesis worthy? Perhaps that's your audience. So knowing who your target audience is, knowing, like, down to like what room you're presenting, things like that, that's very important to have a great presentation. So just getting that basics together helps.
How about the logistics of it all? Like, how do you get the knowledge? Like let's say you're doing a something on mitosis or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, what would be very valuable things for our audience to learn about that will help them, as well as like how you do things, or kind of small little suggestions and tips?
Okay, so if I was to give a presentation on mitosis, cell division, in other words, I would have to know something about it. Okay, so as a tip, I avoid giving highly scripted presentations, presentations that are where every word is pre-chosen and I'm reading from a script. That it comes across as being robotic and not very natural. So if you want to give a relaxed, natural presentation, you have to spend the time to learn your subject. So again, you can't give a presentation about mitosis without understanding how mitosis happens. And
Or at least a little bit of research history in it, or at
yeah,
least talking to somebody about it who has done it before, or maybe you have done it, like did some research on that. So yeah, I see what you mean there.
right. So yeah, so you have to, yes. And so this comes back to, obviously in an undergrad scenario, if you're giving presentations, you are in the course and that you've learned something on that topic in general, and then perhaps you are given, a topic that you have to go research yourself. So you are reading the literature and you're understanding, and you're getting to a point where instead of having a scripted presentation, what I prefer is if people use things like cue cards, or a piece of paper where you have a basic outline.
Yeah.
And you only use bullet points to have an introduction, to have then the body, and then it's almost like having an outlined essay, essentially presentation as essay, but you're just using certain bullet points, because when you're presenting and if you know your subject well, you should only have to glance at your cue card or your outline, and a couple keywords in a bullet should be enough to drive you forward
But
through that.
not reading it, right?
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
reading. Mitosis is very interesting. It is very interesting.
Yeah, no,
The first year is okay for that, but after that, it's like you can't do that.
yes, I would avoid even in first year. I would never want to get up and verbatim read things. It's so spending the time learning is so, in my job, I obviously have to know quite a bit about my job, about what I do in order to do all this type of stuff that I often have to give presentations with very short notice.
Mhm.
So if someone walks into my library and they say, I don't know anything about this library. I'm here for 15 minutes. Can you give me an orientation? I have to know enough about my own work that I can do that. And I just have to, I've learned by experience the knowledge, and I have a formal education in the topic. So
Mhm.
between those two things, I can
Yeah.
put it together and give a presentation that is attuned to what they're asking about. Again, that leads to the thing about like what makes a great presentation, your question about like lead time. And sometimes you don't have a lot of lead time. And now in undergrad you usually do, but I think that your viewers should know that when you get into the world of work, you often do not have a lot of lead time. You can be put into a meeting scenario where you are with your boss and people who are your peers at level with you,
Mhm.
and maybe you have to give 5 minute presentation right there in the meeting about something you've learned. What do
Okay.
you do? So you have to know your subjects, but more importantly, you have to start off with what I would consider as a tip, a strong introduction. So when I want to do any type of presentation, one of the most important things you can do is start with a strong introduction. And it takes only about 1 minute, maybe even less. And when you do that, you want to like you want to be explicit. You want to be say exactly what that presentation will be on. And then tell your audience what they will be able to do with that information you're going to present to them.
Okay.
Okay. And then most importantly, why it matters. So, I could say like, hi everyone, today I'm going to be presenting for 20 minutes about bird migration
Mhm.
and how birds migrate and how they use stopovers in estuarine marshes, and they have certain flight paths. We're going to talk about where they're going for breeding, and where they go for feeding, and where they rear their young. So it's a complete picture of migration.
Mhm.
And when you, at the conclusion, you will understand a little bit more about the bird life cycle, avian life cycle, and you will be able to understand more about bird migration in your area.
Yeah.
And you should, and you see what I've done there. So there like I have just come up with this introduction just speaking off the top of my head. Okay.
Yeah.
Like about bird migration. I don't actually probably know enough to speak, but I've crafted what can start off as a presentation about bird migration
Okay.
from nothing. But at the very end there, you see, I started to get into the why. I didn't quite complete it, but I started to get into why, because I said, and you should then be able to understand about bird migration in your area where you live.
Okay.
And so I'm
The
getting
takeaway,
into,
basically, it's a takeaway
sorry,
for what you just learned, and say, hey, you know what, you take this and do this. So, and
yes, it is a
like any good,
takeaway.
oh, sorry, like any good presentation, you got to make sure that you captivate your audience. You know what you're talking about, explain it. And the first and last part of an essay or a presentation or a video should be the most important parts. That's my opinion. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Um, yes, yes. I mean, the first part like I've just explained, is that you're laying out what you're doing. It's the, it's the old trick of like, tell your audience what you're going to do it, and then at the conclusion, tell your audience what you've done. And so,
I like
because
that.
yeah, you've basically reinforced by start and end. So yes, that is then in summary, summarizing as a conclusion is very important because you're hitting again what they have learned and why it's important. You may be repeating yourself, but I think that it's important that your conclusion in a way is mirroring your introduction.
Mhm.
But your conclusion is taking the information that you've just imparted over half an hour or 15 minutes or however long it is,
Yeah.
and you've encapsulated it with context.
Yeah.
Maybe you decide in your conclusion, take a step back, and you're like, how does this fit into a larger picture? Maybe you say, here's some suggestions for everyone to go forward and to learn about this more yourself.
Yeah.
And so, when you talk about tips, one tip I do have is make sure that you have something for more than what you've said. If you have something for your audience to take away, that's really important.
Yeah, okay.
Like
Sure.
either they have, like a handout. Giving people a handout is wonderful. They can walk away with that. And also when you have, or perhaps you're doing it virtually and you have like a little virtual handout or even some links that you put into the,
Yeah. Mhm.
something that people can chew on and get back to you about if they have further questions, something that they can take it forward.
Okay.
One thing I will often say with presentations that have a lot of information is I will tell people that there will be a handout because not only does it allow them to, bring the audience can go away with something.
And enjoy it more.
Yeah,
Enjoy
but
it more and go, not worried about having to lose all this information.
that's right. And actually, that's exactly what I was going to say. It means that they don't have to spend as much time presenting, like they don't have to spend as much time as taking notes.
Which I
Uh,
hate.
they can enjoy and knowing that they're going to get something. Now, of course, that means you have to make it a good handout with enough, like enough information that if it's like a handout or it's like, here's a link and you're like, and someone's like, well, oh God, I should have taken notes because what the person gave me was so poor. So you do have to do that. Now, of course, just to go back to the fact that you asking from an undergrad context for students, if you're going to be presenting to your class, your audience is not really your class, is it? Your audience is your professor.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
see what you mean there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's if you get a bad mark, hey, it's because he said it was a bad mark. He gave you the bad mark because you
Right.
wrong or yeah.
Yeah, but from a point of like handouts and things like that, it might be nice for students, but it might not be necessary. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Mhm.
it's what you need to judge as valuable because your audience, if you're presenting in front of your class, unless your class is grading you, which by the way, I have been in classes where that happened, is more at the master's level, but where your classmates are actually grading you.
I've been graded before actually in undergrad, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep, yep. I thing is with psychology is you end up doing lots of presentations. I did an hour-long presentation one time for my undergrad class.
Mhm.
I did two 1-hour presentations, I think. And it takes a long time, but I just love doing it for some reason. I don't know why, but I just like doing it. And we've been graded. Sometimes even the people you work with or do the project with or presentation, sometimes you grade each other.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Yes. Sure. I can see that. So in that case, then knowing that does inform who your audience is, and it informs what you do for your audience.
mhm.
So if it's just your professor grading you, your audience is really one person in a way. And that's who your eggs are all in one basket. If you're being graded by your fellow students, or there's a feedback form, or there's something like that, then or the professor can be grading for class participation. And then in that case, you better engage your audience. So then it's, you know your audience a little bit better. So then like handouts could be applicable. Also then, let's talk a little bit. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about PowerPoints versus live demonstrations.
That's what I was going to ask about though. What about videos to show, visuals and slides, or Kahoot? How do you feel about those?
Okay, well, I'll deal with Kahoot separately.
Yeah.
So when I talk about videos, okay, let's actually talk about slides first. You can do PowerPoint slides if you want. If there's nothing that if you cannot do a live demonstration of something. So, or it depends on the class. Like if the professor is like, I will be grading your slides, or I expect slides as something as the basis of your presentation. Like obviously you have to look at like what the parameters of the assignment are. So, I'm often thinking from a work point of view where there might not have to be any slide deck. PowerPoint might not be necessary. I find that PowerPoint can hamper a presentation because then it straitjackets you into what you've predeterminedly going to present upon. I mean, it can be a great help because you can't remember what you're going to say next or whatever, and you go to the next slide and you're like, oh yeah, there it is. But the problem with slides is that people often put way too much text. They end up reading from the slide, which is a big problem.
That's
is then you're
we've done that before in one of our projects. I
Yeah.
got these in the class, but I felt bad about reading it.
Yeah, so essentially, like anyone, like you could have just had those slides emailed to everyone or printed out, and people could just read it for themselves. Like a presentation has to be giving information that you can't just sit there and read. It has to be giving something extra.
Yeah.
And so if it's possible to do a live demonstration using a website or a tool or something that's like visual, or it doesn't even have to be online. I mean, like, science teaching, like live demonstrations of like, putting an acid and a base together, or dropping like alkali metal into water and looking at an explosion. You can do things like that are visual and memorable. And you're also teaching, you're more than just teaching what, you're teaching how. How do you do something? So I do this quite a bit as a librarian. I'm teaching people how to use databases or a library catalog. I would much rather demonstrate that by actually getting into that database and doing it than just showing a slide where it's like a frozen image. And because then if you have a small enough group, you can have someone say like, oh, well, how do you use the advanced search feature? Well, if you're on a slide, you don't have access to showing them how to do that. You can't adapt to your presentation.
I see what you mean.
Yeah. So those are the slides can be helpful. No, I mean, if you are doing a presentation that's like, it can't really be demonstrated, it's more abstract. So like to go back to my idea about presenting about bird migration. Okay. If I was to present on bird migration, I could maybe show some videos. And videos are really good, but it might have to be very slide based. Like, it depends on your topic, because it's more like you're inside a room. You can't like demonstrate birds migrating in the flesh. So you probably are stuck on slides, but that's okay if you just make them entertaining, visuals, and not so much text. Remember, text are only there just as key little words for you and because if someone is reading the words, they're not necessarily listening to you.
Yeah, you don't want full sentences. You want quick bullet points, maybe a couple sentences, maybe just maybe some partial kind of notey kind of, you know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think it's good. And can it, my opinion on slides are,
What's that?
I don't like using them.
Good.
I don't like using them.
You
I,
do-
I'm not sure if I'm alone on this one, but when I give a presentation, I ask, do I have to do slides? If they say no, I don't do slides.
So how do you convey that information?
I talk in a very interesting way, and I don't just talk from a script. I got notes. I describe my thing, and then I get audience participation.
Okay.
I mean, in my opinion, that works for me. I
It is
don't
a-
like doing presentation. I don't like doing presentations with slides, unless it's like maybe to a younger audience. Maybe I might do that, but I like just talking about things almost candidly that I know a lot about. Feels good to do it, and I just like doing that.
Sure.
I just hate teachers go, oh, we have to do slides. It's like, why? But
Okay.
that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it.
You're sticking to it. Yes. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, and that's the role of storytelling. And telling a good story is absolutely key to presenting. Presenting, if you think about like the role of storytelling, humans are meaning making creatures. We mean to make meaning out of the phenomena we witness. And so as a presenter, if you're able to tell a compelling story, that will go 9/10 of the way to having someone walk out of your presentation thinking, oh, wow, I really learned something.
Mhm.
And so I just want to get on you to a couple of things. You talked about we talked about visuals, slides, but I want to talk about videos. Videos can be useful if they are on topic and concise, because you do not want to turn your presentation over to a video.
Yeah.
If you got 15 minutes and you have a 7-minute video on something, what are you doing? Because now you're not presenting. Well, if anything, you're there to present a video and then have the video do all the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
And then where do you go from there? So what I would suggest is that if you're going to use a video, use it sparingly. Use maybe a portion of it that's the most important point where you have it already keyed up, and then you've tested this ahead of time.
Yeah, you want to make sure you
Test
get
it.
the right
Yeah.
file format.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or that, like, because often when you're introducing yourself and whatever, maybe the computer locks out, maybe the video resets back to 0 minutes, maybe the website times out.
Yeah.
So you have to practice a little bit where that, and now we're going to watch 15 seconds of this video, and you should be able to know that you can turn to it and press play, and it will be keyed up, because that kills your time and your momentum in a presentation when it's a blank screen, the
Yeah.
video has disappeared, it's no longer enmeshed in what you're trying to do. So practice videos, make sure you know what you're doing exactly with them. Kahoot.
Good old Kahoot, the fun stuff, right?
Kahoot makes sense if you need to know that information in order to structure your presentation on the fly. Like, and I tie this into videos. If you show a video, you have to be prepared to explain why you showed that video after that video is done. That's the challenge that I would give to anyone who uses a video. Okay.
So guys, so you say something like, "Hey guys, I've shown you this video about migration. Now just notice how they're flying that way quickly, et cetera, and that's is that what you mean, or something like that?" Or
Yeah, so exactly right. You're tying it back into your talk, and so yes, if it was video bird migration, it would be something about, like, note this, and this about what the bird did, or where this flock of birds has moved. This is the, and it's like, this tells us blah blah blah, and then you're carrying it forward. So Kahoot, in a similar vein, I have seen, now Kahoot is something I've never seen in school because, I mean, this is more of a modern thing that I've had to see like at work.
Mhm.
Nothing kills an entire presentation as dead as going to Kahoot because you are then having to get people to pull out their phones. You are going to have to get them onto, so this all takes time, right? Like, I don't
Yeah.
care how fancy everyone is with phones and technology. You've got to like structure at least 3 minutes for everyone to get on the website and to be ready. So your whole momentum breaks. So if you're going to use Kahoot, oh, here's the other thing is that I've seen people use Kahoot where the information is more of like silly questions that are of a ha-ha nature that don't actually provide any information that's necessary. Like it, so if I was to use Kahoot, it's because I'm asking questions that I want to know the answer to in order for me to continue forward after playing Kahoot in a way that structures my conclusion or it actually affects the outcome of the presentation. So
Yeah.
like it's basically I would use Kahoot because I need to know as the presenter information from the audience that then I need to then apply for the rest of the presentation.
Okay.
So like if you're doing a presentation and you're just like, all right, Kahoot time. You waste 3 to 5 minutes getting everyone on Kahoot. Then you ask them, okay, do you like pineapple on pizza? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And then they either say, yeah, and I'm a fan of pineapple on pizza. So I know it's divisive, but you let's say 90%, let's say you give this presentation a few different times. One time, 90% says, yes, I like pineapple. That's the group. Next group, group B, it's 50-50. Group C, 90% of the people in that group don't want pineapple.
Yeah.
And after playing Kahoot 3 different times with 3 different groups, and they give you 3 different kinds of answers, and you just continue on with the presentation as if it didn't matter what they said. That is first of all, it's a huge waste of time. In some ways, you have insulted your audience because your audience is now like, why did we do that? And people can tell, even if they're not maybe even conscious about it, but at least subconsciously, they have they have taken in the fact that you have not used that information that they've given to you for anything.
Yeah.
And
I
so that's why I would be very wary about Kahoot. It would have to be well structured into and be a vital component of information for it to make any sense.
absolutely. Can I tell you what? I had there's a presentation that was done in my class. I didn't do this because I wouldn't have done it, but they did Kahoot and it was half the presentation was Kahoot. I'm like, that's not right.
Yes.
If it was an hour presentation and you did like 10 minutes, that's fine. But half of it was Kahoot. I'm like, how are you supposed to learn from that? I
Well,
just couldn't believe somebody did that.
well, this is it, is that you're the audience that's supposed to be learning. And so if there's no proper context, well, there's no point. No, there's no point. So no, I'm not a fan. I have yet to see it. I have yet to see it be used properly.
Yes, especially in the first and second years and third years and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
think here. Um, is there anything necessary for a presentation you haven't touched base on yet quickly or
I would say it's very important for people to remember that time goes a lot faster than you think.
yeah, I timed myself.
Way faster.
For that hourly one I did, I
Yeah.
timed it and I got right down to 59 minutes.
So when you say that you timed it, does that mean that you practiced ahead of time the presentation?
Twice.
Okay.
But I really knew my subject really well, so it kind of helped. That
Yeah.
was a good thing. That was a good thing to help. And I timed it and I got it perfectly. There's other girl who did it and she did like 40 minutes and then she just stopped. Like, He said an hour. You got
Right.
to appease your teachers, right? They tell you you can't, like for instance, you can't do it in 10 minutes. If it's an hour, you can't do it in 40 minutes. It's got to be an hour. They want certain things for
Right.
that presentation. You must deliver.
So if it's an hour, then you have to think, if you're getting into a long presentation in an hour, you might be also thinking, do I wish to have breakout sessions? Do I wish to have a workshop, a small workshop component where you get people to stop listening to you and for 5 to 10 minutes do something? Like that can happen in more advanced presenting,
Yeah.
as opposed to presenting for a whole hour. Do you want to have a Q&A section, questions and answers? How are you going to handle that? How much time are you going to allot for it? And so tied to the idea is that time goes way faster than you think.
Yeah.
And the fact that you should learn to slow down, try and remove your ums and ers, try to think about tone, to not be like shrill, and to like just have a nice neutral tone where you're going slow, because time goes so fast when you're presenting, and you're speaking, you should be speaking slower than normal. Then you have to realize you're not going to get into as much information as you think. Everyone has the idea that if you have an hour or half an hour, you will have the opportunity to just give so much information, and it's always less than you think. So, if it's very important, practicing ahead of time, especially
Practice in front of your parents too, not in front of people who are professionals, but a parent, because parents can say, "Hey, that doesn't make any sense. What do you mean by that?" Right? And they can kind of and your parents at your papers in your first year too, whatever, right? Because they know one thing it doesn't make sense. Some of them are educated, some of them are not. I don't know, right?
yeah,
But my parents, my mom's got grade 12, my dad's I'm not sure what he got, but I practiced it for my mom because then she'd give me tips. Of course, she's your mom, so she'd be like, "Oh, you did great." I'm like, "Mom, I don't want to hear about what I've done well. What were the things you didn't understand and how can I improve it?"
yep,
And then they do it.
yep, yeah,
You
sure.
know?
That does help. And again, that's something that might be because you're giving a very important presentation.
Mhm.
And you need to practice that. I will tell people though, over time, you learn to not have to do that. If you do lots of presentations, you don't have to practice them anymore.
Yes, that's what I found. That hour-long presentation I've done, and when you get a bachelor's in psychology, you're doing presentations like every semester, at least 2 or 3, maybe 2 or 3 times, once or twice, whatever it may be for each course. At least got one presentation. So I got used to it so well that hour presentation, I got it done within 59 minutes and 30 seconds or something like that, because I knew how to do them. And I
Right.
was passionate about what I was talking about. If you're passionate about what you're talking about, you can think time can go very, very fast.
Yes. So, and just to piggyback on your idea about a timed presentation being like 59 minutes and whatever, another skill that happens in the workplace more is the ability to tailor a standard presentation. Like, so for example, I have the ability to speak about what I do for my work and about my library for 30 seconds for an elevator pitch, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, 45, or an hour, or 2 hours,
Yeah.
and without really breaking a sweat. Because when you present enough, you will start to hone in how much detail you can stick in 2 minutes, how much you can do in 5. You really do get practiced at it. And so when someone comes in and they say, hey, can you give me an overview of your library? I have 10 minutes. I have then, for myself as a presenter, I don't need to practice that. I don't have to say to them, could you go away and I'm going to practice this, then I'm going to come and like you can't
Yeah, then
you
you'd be
can't
dead in
do
the
that.
water then, eh?
But the crazy thing is that I do know professionals who do that to people. And it's not good because often that person won't come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen professionals who are like, I'll schedule it for next week, and I'm just like, well, and I've tried to coach them and say, well, you don't like they'll go away and practice it like 4 times over, and I said, okay, but like you're supposed to get to a point in your professional career where you know the subject well enough that you should be able to have someone come in and say this is what they're looking for or whatever, and you should be able to just talk and do it naturally, like
You know,
right.
yeah, absolutely. And that's what you're kind of doing right now. You know a lot about your presentations and you're dispensing it in an appropriate manner that makes sense to people. And that, like when I'm telling stories, if it's a good story and it's very really interesting, you could tell if it's really interesting to somebody because they talk about it, and your audience as well. If they start talking back to you and ask questions and say, "Oh, I understand that, but what if you did this?" Then you know you kept your audience. But if they don't answer your questions, you're dead in the water. I've had that before. I asked a question and nobody answered. I'm like, great, they weren't paying attention.
Yeah, so asking questions of your audience. So if you're going to do that, um, and this is more of a context of from work than opposed to undergrad, because unlike you, I did a biology degree where I didn't have to do presentations almost ever, right? So like my presentation skills are from, from my Bachelor of Education degree, my Master of Library and Information Science degree, and from the world of work. Um, and so if you're going to ask questions of the audience, my advice is that you almost have to ask a question that it doesn't matter if they've paid attention or not, they're able to respond to you in
Yeah.
some way, I'm afraid. Like you have to structure it in such a way that, so for example, if someone comes into my library and they say, yeah, I'm coming in for the first time. Can you give me like a little bit of a tour and an orientation? And I have 10 minutes. I might say a few things for a couple of minutes about who I am, what the library is, what we do, but then I'll say, what do you like? What are you interested in researching, or are you interested in like what's your area of that you study or
Are
whatever?
you undergrad or in high school, or undergrad or a master's, PhD student, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, or, yeah, yeah,
Getting to know your audience, like you said earlier, right? You gotta know your audience.
yeah.
If the students, usually they're pretty forgiving, but someone's bored if you do something boring, right? So
Yes, yes, yes. So if I was to be in an academic library, I might be talking to a student and be like, are you interested for a particular course, or are you here for other reasons, or just get like the nature of it. So, it's not like you're definitely not quizzing them on what you've just said. It's but like, if I was to so if I was to give an orientation to the library and then I was to turn to them and be like, reference interlibrary loan or circulation, what's most important to you? That's probably not a good way to structure things, because then they're like,
looks like you're
like,
hurrying them too. Looks like you're hurrying them a little bit too, right?
well, yeah, but
Yeah.
also like like that question relies on them having absorbed what those three different aspects of librarianship are.
Mhm.
And that's something that's I will touch on, like I'll say, like these are the things the library can do for you. But I wouldn't turn around and then ask a leading question of them that then relies on them having to totally absorb it in order to give me feedback.
Yeah.
Instead, if I was to say, what type of information or what would you here to learn about? And they say, well, I'm taking a course on, in kinesiology, and I need to know more about like muscle mass. And I said, oh, well, then I think sitting down to do a reference interview with you. So like I'm not like I'm asking them questions that then rely on them telling me about themselves, as opposed to them trying to remember like what I had said 5 minutes before in order to formulate an answer.
Okay.
So it's a distinction in how you pose questions of your audience, that then hopefully you have less embarrassing results.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Oh, Warren, I think you gave me some very valuable information. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for being my show once again. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to just kick some knowledge, whatnot. I appreciate
You're very
that.
welcome. Would you like to hear as a parting story my most stressful presentation I've ever given?
Absolutely. What's your most pressure? Where were you sweating bullets at? Where were you sweating bullets?
May 21st, 2022, I presented for 10 minutes to the Governor General of Canada, Mary Simon, Her Excellency Mary Simon, and her husband, in front of high level managers from Fisheries and Oceans Canada and Natural Resources Canada.
Okay.
And I had 48 hours notice, and I had to, the presentation was at the Institute of Ocean Sciences in Sydney outside of Victoria, but I'm living in the Lower Mainland, which means I had to be on a ferry on a Saturday at 5:15 in the morning with everything I needed for the presentation. And the only ferry I could get, even though we're outside of Victoria to do it, the only ferry I could get was from Tsawwassen to go up to Nanaimo, and then I had to drive all the way down the island. And I made it into the auditorium. I made it ahead of the Governor General by 20 minutes. That's it. And I had to present on it was a map. It was a map from 1898 that we were presenting as a gift to the Governor General. And it was a map produced by Natural Resources Canada. At that time, it was specifically, it was the Geological Survey of Canada map that includes her hometown in, if you know, the Governor General is Inuit. She's Indigenous, and the town is on this map from 1898. So I had 48 hours to prepare, plus doing all the travel, plus like making it there literally with 25 minutes, and I'm like, in the bathroom getting my hair all done up. But to prepare for, so all the things we've talked about came into play. One, I had to know my subject cold. So that map had a report that came with it that I sped read 2 days before. So I knew that I was giving it. I found out the report. I started reading the report like next page, and then figuring out what was the most important information from that. That report was 50 pages long or so. So I had to quickly get through and find what was the most important information that spoke to the map, because it was the map. So I know my audience, the Governor General of Canada. I know how much time I had, 10 minutes. I knew I had to learn my subject area, which was this map, this antique map that is 124 years old. And I had to then speak concisely to make sure the Governor General understood. So remember, introduction. What am I doing? But importantly, why does it matter to the Governor General? And you could tell that I'm like, this matters because this is the town that your father's from, or that you're from. And then it had a little dot that said like Hudson's Bay Company Fort. And she says, oh, my dad worked at the Hudson's Bay Company Fort. And then you see, you've hooked your audience. I was speaking to an audience of one, even though I had a whole bunch of people looking around me. At that presentation, It's me and the Governor General. And we are even though you have a room full of people, in that moment is a room of two. And I am conveying with enough time that I can get her feedback about, so like, I'm not just motor mouthing, I'm presenting, I'm like, and this map, and here's your town. Oh, yes. And then, like, you see, I've given her space. So it is a presentation. It's a very formalized presentation, but it's a presentation where I realized that I had to also give space for the Governor General to reply and to help direct.
So,
So yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. What were you saying?
No, I was just going to wrap up to say that it actually went very well, but it speaks to some of the things. First of all, like, I did not sit there with, at best I had like some notes. That's it. I did not speak from a prescribed script. I spoke from just what I had learned, that I had reformulated into my mind into a few key bullet points that I knew that 10 minutes would go by like nothing. So I had to be, less is more. And in that way, I think an important message is that sometimes you don't, like I say, learn your subject, but it's like, learn your subject. So I read that 50-page report, learn your subject. And then I pulled back and I only spoke about just those few key things that were necessary. I did not try and push 50 pages of information into the head of the Governor General. Just those key points. And so you've, in a way, I overlearned the subject and then knew to pull back and then just present just those little key pieces of information.
Interesting.
And then finished. Governor General was happy. I was happy. Please enjoy this 124-year-old map. Thank you for your excellency. I was done.
Nice. Well, that was a great story. I'm
Thanks.
glad you presented that to us on here. Thank you so much. I appreciate that,
Very
Warren.
welcome.
I would like to do another one with you. Who knows in the future? I don't know, but whenever you're ready, let me know. And whenever I'm ready, I'll let you know, and we'll see if we come together.
All right. Very
Much,
good.
Warren.
Thank you, Jamie. Have a good evening. It's always a pleasure.
If you like the Fof Guide videos, we got a lot more in store for you. Hit the notifications bell so that you know that we got them coming out. Hit like, hit subscribe. Always leave a comment. Whether it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down, let us know.